3, 2, 1. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic game week Wednesday. It is officially game week for the Florida State Seminoles as they are currently about to hit the plane and travel over to Dublin, Ireland. They just wrapped up their last practice of game week in Tallahassee just a few hours ago. We're going to talk with Dustin and get the vibe check and see how Florida State has looked throughout the week. I just got to say, gentlemen, it's football season. I was just out there at a joint practice with the Bucks and the Miami Dolphins. Got to see a handful of some former Noles, which I'll bring up later. But it's game week. We're here, baby. I was talking with Austin earlier. It's wild. These week 0 games are kind of hard to get used to. But FSU is now playing in the second one since covering this team practically, and it just is. It's weird, but I'm ready for it. We've talked about everything possibly imaginable about this team, and now we get to go see it on Saturday. I'm amped up, and I hope you guys are too.
It's exciting, man. Like you said, I mean, the season is right here, and the preseason at times it felt like it was going by pretty shortly, and then there were at times where it sped up, and we looked at our calendar, and we're right here, Florida State heading over to Dublin and kick off less than 72 hours away or so as FSU's 2024 season gets underway, and just getting going on Sunday of this week, kind of the first day of game week with Mike Norvell holding that press conference, Florida State releasing a depth chart. I kind of felt like a bear coming out of hibernation, guys. I'm awake and I'm ready for this one.
I'm just excited.
Bear too.
That too. No, I'm excited that we don't have to talk about, summer camp anymore and weight changes and whatever else. Football is here, and that's all that matters. It's been fun to hop on other podcasts and talk Florida State actual football again and what we expect from the season. I'm excited. I'm ready.
Yep, I was with you too, Austin, earlier this week, jumping on 1010XL over there in the radio show over there in Jacksonville and Duval, and just to be able to talk about a game coming up just felt good. And we're going to be doing a lot of that, and we hope to be doing a lot of that in the postseason as well for this Florida State team, as Florida State and the whole entire college football landscape expands in this college football playoff run where you have 12 teams now. It's not like the last few years whenever college football playoff began back in 2014 where you just only had 4 teams. Now, the chances have risen for Florida State now to extend their season. So we're hoping, we go back to Charlotte, but this time, hopefully Florida State is able to earn its way into the college football playoff this upcoming season. But before we get started, as always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit the like button. Also, too, if you haven't subscribed yet, I highly suggest doing that because we only want our subscribers to be chatting. So now, if you're a subscriber, you can chat in there with us. So I appreciate everybody always jumping in there, giving us some questions, giving us some topics to talk about. I first off want to thank everybody this offseason. We try to stay consistent as possible with this, but we've seen a big, massive growth and viewership from you guys, and you guys just staying consistent with us as we try to give out as much content to you as possible. So I want to shout out to you for always coming in here, watching, listening, engaging in the comments, subscribing. That has grown immensely. I think we've gained probably like 5,000 subscribers from this last season. So welcome. If you're new, welcome to the show. We're going to be going live every Wednesday night. Nothing changes there. But just like on Saturday, we'll have an instant reaction show right after the game for you guys. And then once we're on hand too at these games in the season, we'll be on site and we'll be jumping there to give you guys our thoughts and analysis. But we're here. There's no more kind of just talking about practices and here's a nice grab from Malik Benson and here's DJ and the throws that he's making. We're going to see it all unfold in Ireland on Saturday, noon our time when kickoff comes. But I kind of want to start off with probably practice observations. We can't go into deep detail. We're in the season now, so we can't go and give you play-by-play. And, Dustin can't give you the rundown as much as he has been in those articles. But I just want to talk with you, Dustin, and just kind of get a vibe check of what this team looks like. I saw, and on Twitter, a lot of people engaging with me saying, this team looks pretty locked in, and it seems to be that vibe as we head into this game on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought the energy was definitely up for the two practices that we were able to watch this week, that being back on Monday. And then we were also out there a little bit later this Wednesday morning to watch the team before they made those preparations to head over to Ireland. But yeah, I thought the energy was up and the focus was really good coming into this week for the most part. It seems like this team is ready to face another opponent at that point. I think where guys, they're tired of going up against each other and they're ready to take it out on someone else. And you're definitely seeing that from some of the defenders. Comrade Hussey in particular, I thought he had a pretty physical week of practice, and he looks like he's ready to lay the wood on a yellow jacket whenever they get out there in Ireland. So that'll be something to watch for on Saturday. But as far as practice this week, still some good signs that you're seeing from the offense. It feels like they're continuing to move in the right direction as far as that passing attack. The chemistry continuing to get better. The wide receivers put in some consistent performances. I thought Jaylen Brown put in a good week of practice. Darion Williamson had a couple of really good days. And I mean, the catch of the day today in the end zone with a really nice kind of like spinning around and grabbing the ball right there at the corner and then getting the foot down. So that was good to see. Kentron had a nice vertical catch. Malik Benson was doing his thing, and some of the younger guys as well taking advantage of opportunities. I thought BJ Gibson showed out a little bit. Elijah Moore had a couple of touchdown catches today, so definitely some good signs compared to what we saw earlier this preseason. I feel like the receivers are continuing to get in a better and better spot before this first game.
And that seems to be the theme the last couple of weeks and most recent because of this offense clicking. And that's exactly what you want to see when things start to find a rhythm right before you're getting into kickoff, because that is going to translate hopefully on Saturday. My biggest excitement to me, gentlemen, is seeing Joshua Farmer and Darrell Jackson, that two-piece combo, big two-piece combo. I'm ready for the violence. I'm ready for some nastiness. This is Joshua Farmer's time to explode. And it's also Darrell Jackson's time to explode. He's been held back, it feels like. And just off of things that you've told us here on Here the Spear, D-Lou, and reading your practice observations, I mean, this tandem has a chance to be one of the top in college football. Maybe one of my biggest question marks is then who's right behind him? Who is going to take that next step? And that's something I'm just personally really excited for too. Who is going to be a really good depth piece? Because you lost a lot of veterans in that room. But those two, to me, I am super stoked to see on Saturday. I lean on the defensive side. I like when guys get hit. I like physicality. I like the trash talk. I was just out here, with the Miami Dolphins and the Buccaneers, and just seeing Jalen Ramsey out there chirping, talking trash after seeing some hits being laid by his fellow teammates with the Dolphins. It just feels good. Football's back, and I look at Darrell Jackson, Joshua Farm. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm ready for some hits, and I'm ready for it to be against other players and not other guys that are on FSU's offense.
Well, it's like not only are they two potentially elite players for Florida State this season, but it's a hell of a storyline. I mean, with those guys having that relationship dating back to high school, getting a chance to reunite at FSU last year, and then obviously having to wait an extra year because of what Darrell Jackson had to go through and Joshua Farmer not being able to play in that Orange Bowl for FSU last season. So it's like those guys have developed immensely. We pulled up those pictures a couple of weeks ago from what they looked like when they were playing at Gadsden County High School to now what they've developed into multiple years into their respective college careers. And it's insane. That's why they were both on that freaks list. And now you're going to get to see them as close to their full potential as they've been so far in their football careers, right alongside one another again. And I mean, duking it out for the Seminoles. I think that's going to be a really cool thing to watch.
Offensively for you, VZ, and we're going to get to a full game preview here a little bit, but what are you most excited for going into this game if you're, in quote, a fan, even though you've got tons of FSU gear in the back? But just think if you're in a fan's shoes here, what are you most excited for after tons of talking here on Here the Spear this offseason?
I'm really excited to see this running back room finally in action. Just so much talent. We've talked about it ad nauseum all offseason with Roydell Williams, Lawrence Toafili, Kazea Holmes, Jalen Lucas, maybe Sam Singleton sprinkled in there here and there. I'm not sure we'll see either the true freshmen, but there's just so much talent in this running back room. And we know what Mike Norvell can do with running backs dating back to his days at Memphis. I'm really excited to see how that group does, and hopefully a revamped offensive line in front of them that's finally healthy. can help carry them to a really productive season. There's just so much talent there.
I was, bringing up the offensive line there. That's a big thing for me as well, as I want to see that chemistry click way earlier than what we saw last year. Because if that can click, you know what you have talent-wise in that running back room. It is absolutely ridiculous. I put down, this could be a three-headed monster with some of these guys. You look at Sam Singleton. He's been one that exploded in fall camp, showed awesome good signs too in the spring. But I mean, there's so many different kind of variables that Mike Norvell has in this offense at his disposal now on these Saturdays. And if the offensive line can get going there, definitely in the run game, but also too for protecting DJ, that's one of the biggest storylines for me as well, that offensive line and meshing, because you have experience, you have talent, you have returning talent. Now, I want it to be shown on the first series. I needed to be shown on the first series, definitely off the defense that you saw last year under Georgia Tech. It needs to be first series. I don't give a damn. Let's go. You've got too much experience. There's no excuses here under a really talented coach with Coach Atkins.
I would say the offensive line, probably one of the position groups I'm worried the least about going into this game, even though Alex Atkins isn't going to be able to be there on the sidelines on Saturday, just because it's such a veteran group. And I mean, multiple guys in that starting unit have played together, some for multiple years, and you're adding in some really talented transfers into the mix as well. We'll see what happens with some of those starting lineups. I know there's a couple oars on the depth chart, but as far as Darius Washington, Maurice Smith, Jeremiah Byers, you've got to really like what those guys bring to the table. And, Richie Leonard, Keandre Jones, TJ Ferguson, they've all had really good moments in camp. So this is a veteran group. You look at that two deep, 9 of the 12 guys listed are juniors or seniors. You've got, I think it was 210 starts, 345 career games played at the college level.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a unit that powers this Florida State offense. And like Austin was talking about, that talented running back room, this offensive line is going to pave the way for those guys. And I think we should see a multitude of those running backs getting action on Saturday in a variety of different ways. It's going to be exciting to see how Mike Norvell uses this running back room. Because, of course, there's going to be some times where we see 2 running backs on the field, but I think you could get to a point where you've even got 3 out there as far as maybe a guy in the slot.
It's crazy because I was just saying earlier about the offensive line. This is the best I've ever felt about a Florida State offensive line heading into a season. Because if you think about the last half of Jimbo's tenure and the Willie era and the first part of Norvell's tenure, offensive line flat out sucked. And it's taken a long time to get over that. And now, like you just mentioned, there's 8 guys that have legitimate starting experience along this offensive line. And we just feel really good about that group. And hopefully they prove that on the field against some other competition. But it's a really talented group.
Let's go and jump into that depth chart now, gentlemen. And Delu, I want to get your takes on, your instant reaction from some of these things, because definitely there's some things that stand out. I know the fan base too. You're at practices all the time, so you kind of saw a majority of these things coming to you. But still, what maybe stood out to you, and Austin and I can kind of give our reaction on our end?
Well, the first one I've got to point out, and I need you guys to give me my flowers. Let's dial into that linebacker room. And someone I predicted before camp to enter that starting lineup, sophomore linebacker Blake Nicholson. And at the time, you guys weren't the biggest fans of that choice, but I mean, right there, listed as a co-starter with Cam Riley. We'll see whichever one of those guys trots out there first on Saturday. But I think it says a lot to see the rising sophomore right there with. And I mean, he is a senior, but just got here to Florida State over the summer. Someone that's played a lot of football at the college level. And then just stick with that defense as well. I think it says a lot about Kevin Knowles, listed right there as a co-starter at nickel with Earl Little Jr. Those guys have been battling at that spot for the entire offseason, and Earl Little Jr. has shown some really good signs in the spring. I feel like he's continued to grow this preseason. But as we talked about, last week or the week before, Kevin Knowles himself had put together some pretty good preseason practices as well. So it seems like you've had a really strong competition at that spot, and that's going to be interesting. But I think either way, whoever comes out of that starting lineup, you're going to get the other guy in as well throughout that rotation.
Kevin Knowles, VZ.
And we might as well look at that safety spot, because you've got kind of another similar position battle going there where Devontae Brown, someone with a lot of experience, is a co-starter with Conrad Hussey, who could be a rising star on Florida State's defense. This is one that we've talked a lot about as well, and I think we're all kind of in the agreement that Hussey, if he does reach that potential, he could elevate Florida State's defense to a higher level, where Devontae Brown, with that veteran experience that he's had at UCF and Miami and just seen so much at the college level, he potentially offers a higher floor at the moment. But I mean, that's a spot I think that we could see some jockeying back and forth throughout the year, no matter who starts out as the starter.
And I wouldn't even be surprised to even loop Kevin Knowles back in. I wouldn't be surprised to see all three safeties on the field at times with Devontae Hussey and Shaheem, whether that's shifting Devontae down into that nickel position or what, but I wouldn't be surprised to see those looks at all, because Conrad Hussey is just too talented to keep off the football field. I'm still wary of seeing Kevin Knowles listed as a starter. I know he's had good practices, but it's been, a few years since we've seen him play good football against somebody else, and that's going to be important. I was just rewatching that Louisville game from, was it 22, where he had that crazy toe tap interception to seal the game. Ever since then, he's been kind of quiet, and I do want him to make that recovery back to what we saw back then, but it's just been a while.
I do want to point out he was playing nickel in that game.
He was. That's why I'm a little more. I feel a little bit better than him at safety, because he just doesn't have the skill set to play full-time safety. But I feel better about him as a nickel.
And like when he's played good football at Florida State, it's been at that nickel spot. Yeah. So I think that's something that Florida State is kind of banking on here, that he's going to have a little bit of a resurgence.
Mm-hmm. Going off the fans' perspective here, they're not at practices, obviously. So a guy like Jaylen Brown jumping in here and garnering a starting spot, another transfer. And then you look at also to Malik Benson, but that's been, I think fans have kind of understood he'd be in that starting lineup. But looking at Jaylen Brown, what to you has stood out in these practices? I know we actually, the last couple episodes, we've talked about him quite a bit just because he's been making plays, but there's a reason why he's jumped over these guys like Kentron and Darion as well. He's made some quick strides to get down this offense, and it seems like it all depended on DJ coming in here and clicking and finding chemistry with these wide receivers, and it ended up being former LSU wide receiver transfer with Jaylen Brown.
I think it really just ended up being his overall consistency throughout the preseason. I mean, it just felt like from practice 1 to practice 20, he was someone that consistently was flashing in these practices, making plays. And then especially, I would say the last 2.5 weeks, he's probably taken it to an even further level where, like we were talking about earlier in the episode, he's consistently being one of those wide receivers that we're talking about as standouts after these practices. And like you were saying, Logan, I mean, just a redshirt freshman. So it says a lot about the impact that he's already been able to make, just jumping right into this wide receiver room in January. And this is a guy who his best football is ahead of him. He spent one season at LSU, didn't play a ton of snaps for the Tigers, didn't even have a catch last year in Baton Rouge. And that's something that's probably going to change quickly on Saturday against Georgia Tech. He should probably have a couple of catches. If I would imagine, he's certainly going to get some opportunities out there, but you can see the size, 6'1", so he's not like a super tall wide receiver, but he definitely has some length to him, a decent wingspan where he's got a solid catch radius. Like we've talked about before, explosive off the line of scrimmage. I mean, he gets into his routes very quickly, and I feel like he's done a much better job of hanging on to the football as of late. You're almost getting to the point where it's a little bit of a surprise when he has one go off his hands, but this is someone who's going to be an important piece for Florida State in 2024, but he should just get better and better throughout his career at Florida State.
And as Zay just mentioned in the comments, he's the only non-senior starter listed, and he's a freshman. That's very impressive, especially given how much experience is in that receiver room. Even if we've talked about the issues in that room, the inconsistency that they've had, he just got here, and he's already listed as a starter as a redshirt freshman, amongst a bunch of seniors. That's impressive. That really is.
And I think the youth in general is probably something that's worth pointing out on this 2D, because you've got 18 true freshmen or redshirt freshmen listed on offense, defense, and special teams. And I I mean, that just shows that we're going to see a lot of young players getting included in this lineup this season. Last year at this time when Florida State released their first depth chart, you only had 11 total freshmen on there. So definitely an uptick going into 2024. And, Mike Norvell has talked pretty highly about this incoming 2024 class already making their mark in Tallahassee, and also some of those guys who are going into their second year at Florida State as well. So it seems like the Seminoles have a pretty good crop of young talent, and these guys, some of them not starting out the season necessarily as starters, but they're going to work their way into the rotation before things are all said and done.
Mm-hmm. I had to jump in here and give a fellow Steelers fan some love and answer this question. How are we feeling about Marvin Jones Jr.? I don't think it was too much of a shock to see him here on the starting lineup on the defensive side of the ball for Florida State, but just out of excitement level, I listed him as my defensive player of the year. And that was not easy to do, putting him over a guy like Pat Payne or Azaria Thomas. Like, that is not easy whatsoever, but just off of just instincts, I just have Marvin Jones Jr. having a big season for Florida State. And I think that puts Florida State in a really good spot defensively, adding that next or opposite of a really talented veteran, Pat Payton.
I was surprised to see that. I mean, yeah, you went really, really far. Marvin Jones Jr., Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm also, really high on him. I think he's going to have a really good season, a resurgence, if you will, making that move back to the defensive end position instead of playing outside linebacker like he was doing at Georgia. And I mean, so far, like we've seen since he got to Florida State earlier this year, that move has been very fruitful for him. I mean, he's been making a lot of plays, and I feel like he's had a great preseason. We talked about before, last week, Mike Norvell had mentioned that Marvin Jones Jr. was a little bit limited early in the preseason after rolling an ankle. But, I mean, man, he hasn't missed a beat, and he's just been all over the place. Had a really nice sack today, and that explosiveness off the edge combined with his size, which, he's built himself into a college-ready player going into year 3 of his career. Really good strength, really good athlete. And I've personally, Logan took it a step farther, like I said, but I've got him as my breakout player of the year for Florida State.
Don't worry, Logan. You weren't the only one that had him as DPOY. I had him there as well. I don't know what it is. I just have a really good feeling about what he's going to provide for Florida State this season. Is he going to provide the same level of impact that Jermaine Johnson or Jared Verse has the last couple of years? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a really talented defense, and I think him finally moving back to his natural position of a true 4-3 defensive end is going to work wonders for his career. He's got all the talent in the world, and maybe part of it's me seeing his dad be one of the greatest players in program history, saying, "Hey, live up to that level." But I think he can.
Yeah, it was hard to put him ahead of Azaria just because of what we were just hearing all throughout camp, and Dustin was just talking about him at practice today. This kid is on a rise, and it's rising very quickly. So it's hard to do that. And of course, with Pat Payton on the other side, opposite of MJJ. But if this young man has the genetics of his dad with Shade Tree, watch out. I mean, literally watch out. That's a chance to be an explosive player for the Seminoles and Adam Fuller. Anything else from this depth chart, gentlemen? Just more looking at the, too deep.
Yeah, I was saying, one name that pops up for me is Deuce Spann, listed as that second receiver under Ja'Kai Douglas. No offense, I kind of hope he gets passed up sooner rather than later, unless he shows me something. But I'd love to see Elijah Moore or Loy McCoy take some of those reps.
See, the thing I took from it is Florida State, Ja'Kai Douglas, obviously someone that's played in the slot throughout his career at Florida State, means we're going to see some bigger guys inside. Deuce Spann at 6'4", Elijah Moore at 6'4", and that was something that we brought up on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, thinking after Destin Hill's injury and kind of like how this depth chart was going to work out, especially at the slot. And, they kind of did the same thing with Keon and Johnny last year, moving them all over the field, letting them play all 3 wide receiver spots. And it seems like that's something they're going to continue to experiment with a little bit going into this 2024 season. And we'll see how that works out. Another thing that caught my attention, just going to the tight ends, we're not seeing any of the true freshmen there, which I thought was a little bit of a surprise. I know Amari Williams just got here this summer, but I mean, man, he had a heck of a preseason in my opinion. And Landon Thomas, showing some flashes as well, and got here in the spring and had some nice moments. So maybe we'll see those guys pop up there as the season goes on.
I think that's going to be the theme of this season. We're going to see this depth chart continue to rotate quite a bit, and some of these guys that aren't named on here now, or some of these 2 deep, 3 deep guys, even deeper, are going to rise up there. Specifically, definitely in that tight end room, just off the built up momentum they've built so far, and still got a ways to get that playbook down and understand reading the defense too. That plays such a vital factor in getting experience on the field. But man, yeah, we're going to see this depth chart change quite a bit. So we'll be doing a lot more of these segments on Wednesday nights, I'm sure.
Can I bring one more thing
Yeah.
up? Well, I guess
go ahead.
3 more things. But looking over at the defense, you're not seeing Amorion Cooper listed anywhere.
Yeah, I meant to mention him.
We heard the coaching staff talk about him working at safety and at nickel during the preseason. So, I mean, that was a little bit interesting to me. And then last year at Buck safety, Ashlyn Barker was the primary backup to Shaheem Brown for, I think the entirety of the season. And then now on this first depth chart, we're not seeing him in that 2 deep, and instead KJ Kirkland, redshirt freshman, the primary backup.
You love you some KJ Kirkland.
Yeah, he had a really good day today. Ridiculous interception in the end zone. Just kind of one that got tipped into the air, and then he somehow ended up with it. And then finally at linebacker, no Sean Murphy on the depth chart. The transfer from Alabama was able to work with FSU in the spring, but not seeing him on this initial 2 deep, and you've got 6 other linebackers on here.
Mm-hmm. I like me some Quindarius Jones there right behind Ventrell. I like we KJ for you, Quindarius for me, and got to hope fully healthy for Ventrell, but let's get some garbage time in there, and let's get Quindarius and KJ in there if need be, because you just see such good young talent, and Coach Surtain has done a really good job of developing those young men. Let's jump into some game preview, gentlemen. I mean, it's time. Florida State is going to be facing the Yellow Jackets on Saturday afternoon. This is going to be on the East Coast, a noon kickoff. What time is it over there?
5 p.m., I believe.
Is it a 5 p.m.?
Yep, 5 p.m.
Yep, 5 p.m. kickoff over there in their stadium. First thoughts going into this one, gentlemen. I mean, I know once it got announced this would be overseas and everything, we were talking, travel, how that would impact the team and such. But that, to me, is sort of the last thing on my mind. I understand you got to get used to the team is leaving here in an hour and a half and traveling over. But the way that this program start off with Michael Alford, Florida State's athletic director, and then going down Derek Ray, general manager, and Mike Norvell, and how they run the program there in football. They do a really good job of setting their team up on away games, getting them settled in. So none of that really is playing a whole crazy factor to me. I know a lot of people on Instagram were a little shocked that they were leaving this late of the week, but I do believe, though, the team is going to spend an extra day afterward to be able to go out, be tourists for a little bit, and enjoy being overseas. But, gentlemen, y'all's first thoughts going into this one on Saturday?
I'm excited, man. I really don't necessarily know what we're going to see, because Florida State breaking in so many new pieces on offense and defense. I mean, new quarterback, new leading rusher, top 2 wide receivers are gone. Tight end room's been revamped. You lost a couple of starters on the offensive line. Jared Verse, Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, both your starting linebackers, 3 starters in the defensive secondary. And then there were obviously some guys in the 2 deep that transferred out via the portal as well. So, I mean, we're seeing a very different looking FSU team, and there are still some homegrown talents and some guys that have been here over the years still in this lineup, and guys that will be asked to step into bigger roles in 2024. But I think that's kind of what makes it a little bit of exciting, the unknown. So, I mean, I'm not really sure, like I said, what we're going to see from this team just yet, but the preseason, I mean, it was really fun to watch in Tallahassee, some really highly competitive football, and I think they're going to bring that out there onto the field on Saturday. But I think this could be, sometimes early in the season you see some sloppy games. I think this could end up being a pretty good football game between Florida State and Georgia Tech, because you look at these depth charts, you've got a ton of veterans. Georgia Tech, I think 20 of the 22 players listed on their offense and defensive starters are either juniors or seniors. And I mean, Florida State pretty much mirrors that as well. A couple of redshirt sophomores in the mix. I think that could lead to a very competitive and also some good football out there.
Yeah, Brent Key had Georgia Tech exceeding expectations last year. Led them to a bowl game for the first time in a few years, going 7-6, kind of revamped that offense. And now they've got a new defensive coordinator that they hope can revamp that defense. But it's week 0. And as we've seen in years past, things can get weird in week 0. I mean, just a couple years ago, Northwestern beat Nebraska. I believe it was another overseas game as well in week 0. Beat them overseas.
It was
and
in
then didn't win another game the rest of the year. Went 1-11. So weird things can happen. And who knows what's going to happen in this game? As Dustin just mentioned, there's a lot of unknowns on Florida State side. I think Georgia Tech has more knowns, which can be a good thing for Florida State, can be a bad thing. But there's just so many questions that we have about Florida State that we'll finally be able to get some answers to. And it's about damn time.
To put you all on the optimistic side, though, to me, what Florida State, and I understand a lot of talent from last season, blah, 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 but just going into a week 1 game, what they did against LSU, the way that they showed up, prepared, I didn't expect them to win like they did. None of us on here had to score predictions like that. And I think they can exceed expectations where we're being realistic here. Yes, you're overseas, first game, got all the jitters, and Georgia Tech has some returning talent there. But I really trust what I see with Florida State's defense. And there's some answers that we got to see more offensively. But if things start clicking there, then you feel a lot more comfortable and you're going into the second quarter and you can get things moving and start finding a rhythm like they had been in practices. But you're going against an opponent this time. And luckily, this defense isn't much of a threat like you had going in against, obviously, LSU last year. But I like the way that Florida State has prepared for game 1s last few seasons for under Mike Norvell. And I think, too, just looking at the fan base being there, just seeing the social media right now. My family's over there. This is going to be a heavy FSU crowd, gentlemen. I mean, it's just going to kind of be with what you saw in New Orleans when Florida State faced LSU. This fan base does a really good job at traveling. This is going to be a loud war chant. You got the marching Chiefs traveling over there. Shout out to the Chiefs. It is going to be heavy FSU crowd, and I think that's going to play a really good favor in the Seminoles' hand.
And let me ask this, because I was asked about it on a Georgia Tech podcast earlier today. Do you expect there to be any hangover from the college football playoff snub and some of those feelings, or do you think it's going to act more as a chip on the shoulder?
I think it's over with. At least
I think so too.
Internally, it's over with. Fan base, no.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see it on College Game Day on Saturday morning, which raise hell, gentlemen and ladies. Have fun. Raise hell. They deserve it. But internally, just off of things that Dustin's been telling us and just things I hear and just listening to Mike Norvell and all the interviews he's done this offseason, it's gone out of their minds. And it has to be. It has to be mentally gone, or they will not have the season that they should have. And this should be a successful season for Florida City, even with the loss of talent. But I think that is wiped from the mentals.
I agree.
Delu agrees. I said everything Delu was going to say there, so perfect.
But I was going to go back to your point that you were making before, Logan. You were talking about the season openers, the way that Florida State has prepared these last couple of years. And, I mean, it's impressive looking back at what they're able to do in some of these matchups against LSU when you consider that Jaden Daniels was unstoppable in the SEC last year and then went on to win the Heisman Trophy despite his team, having a handful of losses. I mean, Jaden Daniels only scored 3 total touchdowns in those 2 matchups against Florida State. One was in garbage time at the end of the game last year in 2023, and the other took a 99-yard drive at the end of the game in 2022 to throw that touchdown with, I think it was, no time on the clock there to set up that blocked extra point to give Florida State the win. So, I mean, that was impressive. And only 23 points in 2022, 24 points last year. And you look at Florida State's offense, 45 points last year. I know they struggled a little bit in that 2022 matchup, but you look at the year before in 2021, came out and put 38 points on number 8 Notre Dame in that season opener, lost in overtime. But I think it just shows that Mike Norvell, and on the defensive side as well with Adam Fuller and that staff, they prepare very well coming out of the gate. And it's going to be interesting because, as we were saying, Georgia Tech necessarily isn't as talented as what Florida State had to face first against LSU in 2022 and 2023. And that could be a really big factor going into this game, just the way that they prepare and the way that they come out in these types of games.
I wanted to ask y'all, just off of looking at Florida State and Georgia Tech, what stands out to you guys where Florida State can take advantage in this game and pretty early on?
There's one very glaring thing when you look at Georgia Tech from last year, and that's their rush defense. They were in the bottom 5 nationally in both yards per game allowed and yards per carry allowed, 221 yards per game, 5.4 yards per carry. Believe they were even allowing like 2.6 yards before contact. And if Florida State's running game and offensive lines anything like we've been building them up to be, that should be something they dominate. Granted, Georgia Tech's done a lot to kind of revamp that. Brought in Tyler Santucci from Duke to be their defensive coordinator. Duke obviously had a very good defense last year, but that was ran by Mike Elko. It wasn't by Santucci. And Duke had a more talented defensive line. Georgia Tech brought in a couple guys like Thomas Gore from Miami, but he didn't really play much at Miami. And when he did play, he was only playing against Bethune-Cookman and Temple. And then they bring in Jordan Vandenberg from Penn State, who has a 30% missed tackle rate, which is abysmal for a defensive lineman. So yes, they've plugged in some pieces, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to really overhaul their biggest glaring weakness from last year and what we expect to be Florida State's greatest strength for this upcoming season.
I mean, it's really just their whole defense that struggled in 2023. 120th in the country, 437.1 yards allowed. Austin pretty much brought up the rushing stats, but 220.1 or 221.3 yards on the ground per game, 215.8 passing yards per game. They were 109th in the country in sacks, 90th in red zone, gave up 29.5 points per game in 6 games of 38 or more points allowed. The one thing that Georgia Tech did do a little bit well is create turnovers. They forced 25 turnovers, including 14 interceptions. So ball security going to be something that Florida State needs to focus on in Dublin. But you have to think that if this team goes out and just executes their base offense, they should be able to have success against Georgia Tech. And even with Santucci coming in from Duke, I mean, Florida State, they put up 38 points on Duke last season and had some success there, especially as that game went on and they were able to fight out of that deficit. So certainly some areas where Florida State should feel comfortable going up against this Yellow Jacket defense.
Mm-hmm. When I look at Georgia Tech, you look at King, you look at Haynes, Singleton too on the wide receiver side. I'm about to bring up too some bet stuff and look at some betting lines as well. But I look at AZ, look at Fincherell. Singleton has showed that King and them, both of them, can connect with one another. That's something, a matchup that I'm going to be looking at specifically on Saturday afternoon. Is there a matchup that maybe you guys are looking at? Doesn't have to be a maybe one-on-one kind of matchup, but maybe a personnel unit on unit that you are looking into?
I'm kind of sticking with you, and I'm going with Georgia Tech's wide receivers against Florida State's defensive backfield, just because when you look at this, they've got some guys that are pretty explosive out there and bring a lot of speed to the field. But at the same time, I mean, this is kind of what Florida State's defensive backfield is built to stop. And they brought in these defenders and also developed homegrown talents that are these long, lengthy athletes. And I think that's where Florida State might have the advantage going into this one. You look at Singleton, he's 5'11". Malik Rutherford, one of their other starting wide receivers, 5'9". And then you've got Chase Lane at 6 foot. And you go over to Florida State's defensive backfield. I mean, from top to bottom, AZ, goes about 6'2". Fincherell in that 6'1.5" range. Shaheem Brown, 6'2". Devontae Brown and Conrad Hussey have some size on them as well. Earl Little at nickel.
Hey,
he's 6'2". Kevin Knowles, I think he's 6'1". Quindarius Jones, 6'2". So this is what Florida State's built to do. And I think the most important thing, just keeping these guys in front of you, because they're going to bring some real speed to the table. I think Georgia Tech, they're going to try and take some deep shots, and that's where it's going to come down to these guys contesting and coverage and making some really good plays.
I think Florida State wants Georgia Tech to throw the football because Haynes King threw 16 interceptions last year, had 18 turnover-worthy plays. And I saw someone say that Georgia Tech really struggled against man coverage last year and had a stat for it, but I couldn't find where he got the stat from, so I don't want to bank on it. But if we know one thing about Florida State, they're going to put AZ and Fincherell in wide receivers' face and say, hey, good luck. And we expect them to do that. But if you look at last year, Georgia Tech started having success when they started running the football. They started out throwing the football over the field, didn't have a lot of success, and they kind of evolved into a running football team as the season went along. That's when you saw a guy like Jamal Haynes really break out, and Haynes King, even as a runner. I mean, you don't really think of him as a runner coming from Texas A&M. I think he had 150 total rushing yards in 3 years. He had 750 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns last year. It's more than Jordan Travis did. So I think Florida State's going to want to force him into being a passer. And in fact, in games where he threw more than 30 passes last year, Georgia Tech was 0-5. So yes, Florida State wants them to throw the football, but they have to stop the run game first. If they don't stop the run game, nothing else matters.
Yeah, and I mean, Haynes King is a unique quarterback on Florida State's schedule because Austin, I mean, you kind of brought it up with his dual threat ability, but he was one of only 2 Power 5 quarterbacks last year with at least 2,800 passing yards, 25 touchdown passes, 700 rushing yards, and 10 touchdown rushes last year. The other one was Jaden Daniels. So that's pretty crazy to me. I mean, so that's something.
Then you look at the 16 interceptions, you're like, okay.
Yes, he did throw 16 interceptions. That's something I was going to note as well. Like, that's kind of the difference there, those turnover plays, and that's something that Florida State's going to be hoping to create on Saturday. But I mean, Haynes King, he did show some real promise last season as a dual threat. I'm sure that he's going to be wanting to come into the season opener cutting down on those interceptions.
Yeah,
we'll see if he's able to do so. You know, that could very well end up being the deciding factor in this game because, like we've said, 16 interceptions in 2023, threw at least 1 pick in 9 games, and had multiple interceptions in 4 games. So if Florida State goes out there and creates a bunch of turnovers, you know, that could help them very early on and go in and win this game in Ireland.
It's really going to come down to putting them in 3rd and mediums, 3rd and longs, because even if you can limit Haynes King as a runner even a little bit, it's going to help them a lot. Georgia Tech was 3-5 in games where Haynes King had under 6 yards rushing, and the 3 wins were against a really bad Wake Forest team, Miami, which everyone knows here they should have lost if Mario Cristobal wasn't a moron, and South Carolina State. So it's not like those are exactly redeeming wins. It's all going to start with how they can limit the run game.
Yeah, and you got to give it to Haynes King. He's going into another year. He should improve. He wants to improve. So got to give it. You just got to expect for a more improved quarterback as well. And if he's going to add to this running game, I look back at last year, or this upcoming season. You lost Kalen DeLoach and you lost Tatum Bethune. You had some studs there at linebacker. Those guys got to be ready for anything in this game because they've got a rush. I got a running back that can make plays, he can get yards, but then also too, you got to watch that quarterback and keep a close eye on him. And if he's scrambling, and you can't let these 3rd downs, these 3rd and 5s, these 3rd and 8s turn into 1st downs just off the wheels from King, in my opinion. So that's where I'm looking at too. This linebacker room. You look at Lundy, look at Nicholson. Really, really intrigued with Cam Riley, D-Lou. I mean, he's trimmed up a little bit too. It seems like Coach Storm's put him and a little trimming package there with his weight to be able to move east to west real quick. I love it. I like that because I think Florida State is going to miss that kind of Kalen DeLoach vibe that you had which are a little bit more of a smaller linebacker, but could get to places really quickly.
Yeah, that unit, it's going to be one to keep an eye on Saturday because, like you said, Logan, Haynes King with his dual threat ability, if he's able to create some scrambles, that kind of opens things up a little bit for Georgia Tech on offense. And even if you think back to last year, they did a pretty good job, I think, against Jaden Daniels in that season opener. But obviously, Thomas Castellanos got loose a little bit in Boston College. Think back to the year before in that first matchup against LSU, Jaden Daniels had over 100 yards on the ground in that game. And I mean, that was a big reason that LSU was almost able to make that comeback. So definitely shutting down Haynes King's legs. That's going to be important. And not only with the linebackers thing, we could see maybe some Shaheem Brown as a quarterback spy, keep the safeties up a little bit. But yeah, that's going to be something. If they're able to stop that, it's going to make things a lot tougher for Georgia Tech, I think, on offense.
Yeah, I think Cam Riley is going to be really important in this game. Whether he plays the majority of the game or not is still wait and see. But I think someone with that experience and that size is going to be huge against a guy like Haynes King and Jamal Haynes.
Let's go over to some betting stuff before we drop in and give our score predictions. This is going
to go.
Good at. Yep, this is where we're at. I was about to say this is where
I'm joking. I lost all my money.
Oh, never mind then. Never mind. Shout out. Well, this was MMA, so it doesn't really count. But we'll just see what happens on Saturdays, and we'll evaluate and see how everybody does. But I'll give y'all some potential bets. But let's first look at the lines right now, and who knows if this is going to show up on the screen. If it does, then I am a tech genius. Oh my God, here we are, baby. So here we are, Florida State now. You were telling us, VZ, in the production meeting, down to 10.5 in FSU's favor. The over at 55.5. How does that feel for you guys? And tell us, too, in the comments what you think. This seemed pretty accurate to you. We've seen the trim down in the spread quite a bit. I think it's gone down 3 points in total.
Depends,
14.5.
Depends on
what
what
was
you
it,
look
15?
at.
I know it's like 14.5 and 15.5, right?
I only saw like 12.5.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought 12.5 was the line a couple of months ago at one of the ones that I look at, but I don't know, 10.5. I would say it feels about right, just because of all the unknowns, and we haven't seen this team play a game yet. So there are scenarios, I think, where Florida State comes out on Saturday and wins by 3, and there are scenarios where they come out and probably win by 20 plus. It's just that kind of team, and it was that kind of preseason. There were some really good days. There were some bad days. It kind of depends what Florida State team shows up on Saturday. So I think 10.5 is probably a good starting line.
Yeah, I like both of those numbers. 10.5 spread, 55.5 point total. I think both of those are pretty fair.
Yep, I think that's accurate. I did not see this earlier, but we'll see if this. They currently have Roy Dell as the highest favorite to score a touchdown in this game out of both teams at -195. Lawrence Toafili right behind him at -115. Then Jamal Haynes jumps in on Georgia Tech's side at -110. DJ is at -105. And then Malik Benson over there at +105, the 5th favorite to reach the end zone on FanDuel.
Is that first touchdown score or anytime?
That's anytime touchdown.
Yeah, this is just anytime.
So wait, so if DJ throws a touchdown pass, does that count, or is it only rush?
Because he's say this is
probably
rush.
Okay. I'm like,
yeah,
-105 seems low.
Yep. Oh, 100%. I'd be slamming.
Roydell 2-1 though to get a touchdown.
That's
I don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that's fair.
Landslide favorite.
Yeah, he is. No joke. It is heavy.
I want to go. See, I'm looking at some of these pluses, like Ja'Kai Douglas at +200.
Keep scrolling.
That's good value.
I'm waiting to see if what I have in mind for my first touchdown even pops up.
Jalen Lucas. What is that? 220? Sorry, the text is really small.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
+320 for Jalen Lucas anytime, and then it was like plus like
huge
1,500 for first touchdown.
We got Jalen Brown on there. Yeah, he's +195.
Yep, +195 there. Kyle Morlock might be a little sneaky. I've got
a sneakier one than that. Keep scrolling. I want to see if he's on there.
You're gonna make some people some money.
Maybe. I don't know if it's gonna happen or not, but I kind of want to throw a shot in the dark.
Florida State defense.
Florida State's defense is +5. Okay,
they
might.
So
they have it.
Yeah, my idea isn't there. Norvell has loved those, goal line, heavy play action, pop over the top to the blocking tight end. I think that's gonna happen with Jackson West. I don't know why. I have a feeling that's what's gonna happen for the first touchdown.
There is gonna be a sneaky touchdown.
If Jackson West scores the first touchdown of the season, I'll give you $100.
Oh, the first?
Is that what he was saying?
Yeah.
Okay, the first.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a weird feeling. I don't know.
No Lundy package?
That'd be interesting. But would that count as a Florida State defense touchdown? I think it technically would. Because he's not listed on the offensive depth chart.
I think they're going off of the defensive side.
They just wouldn't pay you out.
They would just cancel it.
I want to bring up this parlay, though, that FanDuel has on here. Free promotion out here. FanDuel, hit us up. We're open to talking business. But here's this 4-leg same game parlay. Florida State, you take the spread -10.5. You've got Rodell Williams, anytime touchdown score. You add DJ over 1.5 passing touchdowns. And then Eric Singleton, Georgia Tech star wide receiver, over 55.5 yards. 55.5 is a little strong for me. That would have to be a big game, in my opinion, after what we've just been talking about in that secondary.
Well, it's about right in the middle of what he did last year. I mean, he had 6 games over 55, 6 games under. So that's it's a pretty good line based on what he did last year.
I don't know. It's a tough one.
Are you tailing it?
Nah,
tail this.
I'm not. I'm not tailing it. I'm
it's
not
plus
sure.
$581. $10 gets you $58.
Plus 581 on a 4-bet parlay is not enough for me.
Yeah.
I need like a plus 700 if I'm. This just isn't worth it. 55.5 receiving yards. I don't know if that happens. And then I'm not sure how I feel about the Roydell Williams anytime touchdown score. It's possible, but
I think I feel best about the Roydell anytime touchdown. It's the rest. I'm kind of like, eh.
Yeah, DJ 2 touchdown passes, with the way the passing game has been kind of fluctuating throughout the preseason, like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's why it's betting, right?
Yeah,
but not me.
No,
not me.
Definitely in week 0. We don't even get to go to week 1. In week 0, God knows what's going to be happening. Definitely, with, like you just said, VZ, who knows who could be getting the first touchdown because it's Mike Norvell. But yeah, out of this, $10 for $58. 17 people though are tailing this, so we'll see if that rises as the week goes on. But we're going to try to do more of this. If you like this, drop it in the comments. And I know a lot of y'all listen or watch on the VODs as well. You don't come in here live, but drop in the comments if you guys would like to see us do more of these segments, because mainly just Delu and I. VZ will chime in, of course, but Delu and I are heavy on Hard Rock, and we enjoy some betting. So we love discussing
heavy
all
on
this
my
kind of
losses.
stuff. Yeah, heavy L's. But shout out to my UFC guys for saving me. It's very rare. I only get it once a month, but they give me enough. They give my money back so I can do football betting. So
since I said that you shouldn't tail that, you should probably tail
it. Probably so. Absolutely. Fade it. Fade Delu.
But I might have just reverse jinxed it. So
shut up, please.
But something that we shouldn't fade is our score predictions, because we went undefeated last year. Not in the score predictions exact numbers, but
that'd be impressive.
Money line, we would have made some money. Well, I mean,
Florida State favored in most of those games, so not as much.
We probably would have made a lot of money. We would have had to lay down quite a bit and add some parlays.
And the BC, the BC game, I would have been freaking out.
Oh yeah,
I'd be like, oh, they were minus 500. What are we doing? Put down $1,000 on this game.
Would have been so pissed. Oh, it would have been triggered. But here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Throw it in the comments. We're about to jump into our score predictions for Florida State, number 10 ranked in the country, versus Georgia Tech. We've talked about enough. I think we've done enough analysis and everything. It's time to just start dropping down some scores. Do we want to go I go, then Delu, then VZ, or does someone want to start off the season and we go in chronological order? I don't know how we would end the regular season, who it would be. Didn't really go that far into trying to organize this podcast. We don't go that deep. I'll go first because I like going off the gut in week 1, and it's week 0. This number has just stayed in my brain, and it's 2 numbers, and it sounds delicious. I don't think we're going to get this high, but my gut really wants me to get there. No.
I just changed it. Get high.
Remember when he just said you got to go with your gut sometimes, and now he's saying he's not going to go with it?
I know. Now I'm trimming it. But not by a lot. I'm going with my gut, but trimming it just a tiny bit. I've got Florida State winning this one 34-17. And I'm leaning, I don't know if Georgia Tech is going to score that much, but there's going to have to be some playmakers that make plays for them, and it is week 0, so there's a reason why I'm doing that. But I've got Florida State winning this one 34-17 to finish off the season. Want to know to begin the season.
We're in prime.
We're in December.
It's over.
We're in December. Game's over. Season's over. Wrap it up. But yeah, the path back to what should have been the college football playoff begins now. Want to know for me?
Is it my turn since you put me up here?
Sure is. I'm going in kind of a chronological order here, just off of our faces.
Well, like I've said multiple times, I mean, I really don't know what we're going to get on Saturday. You know, I like to say I'm confident after watching like 20 of FSU's 24 practices so far, but you know, there's so many unknowns, and there are some things that you're not really going to know until this team just hits the field and gets into the action and, you know, gets into the fight, like how they're going to respond and things like that. I feel like this defense is going to be something that FSU can lean on in this game to help them out early. You know, if the offense does have some struggle getting into a rhythm, and just the way, like we were talking about earlier, you know, the way that Florida State has prepared for some of these season openers and how they performed in those games the last couple of years gives me a little bit of confidence going into this one. So I'm going to go Florida State 37, Georgia Tech 20. I do think the Yellow Jackets, you know, they're going to have some chunk plays at times. They're going to have some drives. But as we've seen with this defense, I mean, once you get to around that 20, 25-yard line, I mean, they really buckle up and they become one of the best in the country. And there are going to be some drives that get shut down in that red zone. So looking forward to Saturday.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, just for giggles, I looked back at the last score prediction I made, which was the Georgia game, because you know I was writing my season preview or the game preview, and I had to make sure I was following the same format that I've done in years past. Scroll to the bottom, like, let me just see what I put. I put 27-10, and newsflash, it was not 27-10 in that game. So hopefully I can get a little bit closer to the score this time.
You were so nice by doing that. Were we in that realm, D-Lou? I mean, I definitely was a little nicer for sure. Like I could have gone a little bit higher.
I think I said 31-10, something like that.
I think we all three said 10 points for Florida State and kind of in that 27 to 35 range for Georgia. And no, it was not that whatsoever. So we should be a little bit closer this time around against the other team in that state. Like I said earlier, week 0 brings wacky things, and wacky things mean wacky scores. And, you know, Jamal Haynes is good. Haynes King is good. And Georgia Tech knows what they want to do on offense. Florida State doesn't quite know, but I think they'll figure it out as the game progresses. I've got Georgia Tech on a sneaky cover, but Florida State's still winning 31-23.
Okay. And it's crazy, though. You know, if we were going back to maybe 2 episodes ago, I was predicting where it comes down to maybe a Ryan Fitzgerald field goal. But
yeah,
I think the confidence factor climbed up once we started seeing DJ connect a lot better with these wide receivers, which that changes the game solely big time for Mike Norvell and what he likes to do with explosive plays and getting points on the board quick. But man, oh man, I mean, I know we talked about it earlier, but there is a lot of excitement about seeing some of these players out there on Saturday. I mean, I didn't really get to mention Malik Benson, just having a chance to see him in one practice in the spring. This is legit speed, and you only got a small little tiny taste of it in the spring game. Wish we could have seen more, but honestly, I don't want anybody else on the defensive side to see this. I want the fans to see it on Saturday, and I think Malik Benson, man, it's crazy. You go from Johnny Wilson, you lost Keon Coleman, and you have a guy come in here and take that spot and like take it and just grip it and take it away from guys that have been around on this campus for years and years. Super impressive, and I think fans will be really excited to see him in a few days, which is crazy to think about. Any last words from you guys before we wrap it up?
I did just want to I didn't get a chance to do it earlier in the episode, but I did want to highlight 2 guys on Georgia Tech's roster who maybe have a little bit more motivation going into this game because they're from Tallahassee. And that would be on offense, you've got starting tight end Avery Boyd. He was previously at receiver, had 2 starts there last year, but now going to be moving to tight end for Georgia Tech, listed at 6'3", 240 pounds, and played at Rickards High School. And then over on the other side of the ball, you've got cornerback Amari Harvey listed as a starter for Georgia Tech. He had 6 starts last year, 31 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. And he went to Florida High. So 2 local guys that might have a little chip on their shoulder getting to play against their hometown team. But as far as Florida State, you know, this is a game of debuts. You know, you talk about Malik Benson, but really across that offense and defense as well, you're going to have a lot of guys playing their first games as Seminoles, obviously DJ and Roy Dell, and then Marvin Jones Jr. I mean, that's an exciting story in its own right for him, you know, following in his father's footsteps a little bit, and we'll see what he's able to do. But I mean, man, this is going to be a fun one, and I'm excited to get on here afterwards to recap this one.
Exactly. We'll be back here for an instant reaction right after the game is over. So make sure you guys either bookmark us or make sure you're subscribed or put a reminder on. We're going to be live here, and it's going to be that way all throughout the season. Sometimes it might be a little bit later just because we're going to be at pressers and such. but still, nonetheless, it's just going to be like last year. We'll be on here giving you guys our instant reactions. So stay tuned to this YouTube channel and across all of our socials as well. But like I said earlier in the episode, I want to appreciate everybody hanging out with us this entire off season. We saw our viewership grow. We saw a lot more commenters. We saw a lot more subscribers, and we're deeply, deeply appreciative of that. We see that every time we talk about numbers a lot overall here as a team on Here the Spear, and just to see it grow and grow to where it's at now really makes us happy, and it makes us like really motivated to try to get better at the way we do content and try to dive deeper into making sure that we're giving you guys good analysis on a week-to-week basis. So appreciate it. Shout out to D-Lou too, grinding his ass off during fall camp. All of our team, Tommy, everyone involved there in Tallahassee, they've done a great job giving you guys some content at NoleGameday.com. So now it's time for the fun part. Let's jump into some Saturdays. Let's jump into some more chants. That's going to be blaring in Ireland. Looking forward to that. And yeah, we're officially kicking off the 2024 season, ladies and gentlemen. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button. I know we're trying to get to 100 likes. We might be able to get to 200. Who knows? But make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, so then you get notified when we do go live. Hit that bell button. When you hit that bell button, it notifies you on your phone when we do go live. So make sure you hit that. So then we'll see you guys on Saturday afternoon after the game wraps up. Enjoy the rest of y'all's week. Safe travels over to Dublin, Ireland, if you're going over there. If not, just enjoy the ride, and we'll talk to you guys on Saturday. Peace.